let me tell you a little bit, a story that comes to my mind. And this comes from this was about the mullet days. This was about the time that I had the mullet going. And we had, let's see, our oldest was 15, Brandon was 15, Amber was about 13. Candace would have been little, she was about 3. And we were off visiting, and we were with friends. And we were together, and so the kids were together, the adults were together. And it came time for us to go to an event. And the kids headed out. They climbed into a car. One of them was driving age, and they climbed into a car and got out. The rest of us split up into 2 cars because we needed an extra car whenever we got to our destination. And we went out. It was a little short drive before we got onto the interstate. And I'm sure everybody can relate to whenever you're getting on the interstate and you're coming on the on-ramp, and there's a big 16-wheeler in the fast lane. And in the left lane, I was right. It just merged right on, and you're sitting there and you got the wheel up, about your window, and there was just a sense of just the size of it and the presence of it. And as we were getting on the part of the road that we were on, had a slight turn to the left, and the roads, it had rained fairly recently. And just as we were coming around the curve, you could see just ahead, it just came upon us, there was a car broadside in the road. And I apologize, because I relived the emotion at the moment, but there was this car broadside, and it was like we didn't know what to do. I broke to the right. I took the shoulder, and I knew the truck had to go the other way to the center median. But I heard the crash, and I'm ashamed to say that I was content in continuing on down the road a ways. I was on the shoulder. I just rolled ahead probably a quarter of a mile, and I pulled over to the side, and I told Nikki, I said, I don't want to go back there. And you can put yourself there and ask yourself what goes through, but what was going through my mind is I don't want to. I don't want to see something that's hard to forget. I just don't want to deal with the mess. I just don't want to deal with it. I'll take my time. I'll let somebody else get there first. And then I can kind of come along and kind of be on the peripheral or something and feel like I'm a part or something. Or just I can't drive away, I know that. But I'm also reasonably content to let somebody else get there first. And I'd sit there for just probably no more than half a minute. And the other car of adults pulled up behind us, and they ran to the car and they said, that was the kid's car. And in an instant, my world changed. My perspective changed. And I went from being content with sitting there and waiting and letting somebody else deal with the issue to running as fast as I could. I remember I jumped out of the car and I ran. I can't remember anything but just running. And I'll go ahead and tell you that the kids were fine. The car was totaled. The kids were fine. But it was at that moment that God really taught me something about myself. And I've never forgotten it. And it's the distinction that takes place whenever you say you care about somebody versus whenever you care about somebody. When you love them, when you feel a love for them as a father for a child. And from that time forward, the story of the prodigal son became the story of the father of the prodigal son for me, because I read about him running. And I realized just how connected he was and the difference that it made. And whenever, the translation is, and what it carried with me, is we all sit here in a room, and I say it over and over again, how much we care for the lost. And how we'll do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Jesus. But the probability is that until that impacts us in a personal way, we're probably content with letting somebody else get there first. And we're probably content with just avoiding the messiness of what it means to really reach the lost. But those of us that are in the room that have a loved one or a friend or a child or a parent that doesn't know Jesus, it changes your perspective. Immediately, it changes your perspective, and you go from a contentedness to let somebody else deal with that, to avoid the messiness, to not be faced with the trauma, and you become intent at being the first one there, trying to do what you can, and your life changes. And what happens is if you have become one of those people, or if you truly have loved somebody who was lost, if you truly are in love with somebody that doesn't know Jesus, you become a part of a different church. Because all of a sudden, that's the thing that you're most passionate about. And you're running there. And that's what I want you to understand. We talk about empowerment. If we want this group of people to be empowered, you've got to love somebody who's lost. And if you love somebody who doesn't know Jesus, you will figure out a way to get them there. You'll do stupid stuff. You'll have lip sync battles. You'll have cover songs. You'll be in church and you'll watch clips from the Breakfast Club. You'll do whatever it takes to reach people that don't know Jesus. And in the same way that Jesus did whatever it took to reach those that were lost, there will be those who set aside and say, is that okay? Is that right? Isn't that wrong? And whenever they had the same challenge with what Jesus did, the blind guy says, listen, all I know is I was blind. And now I see. I don't know if he's a sinner or not. I don't know if it was wrong for him to heal on the Sabbath or not. But I was blind and now I see. And that's your why. People can set aside. I can remember when Bobby and I were going up to Tulsa 15 years ago. I remember sitting 2 miles up the road while the video experience was going on here at 1 o'clock with folks that were very concerned about whether or not video teaching was valid. And they were concerned as to whether or not there was an adequate incarnation of the Spirit, as to whether or not God would actually do something via a screen. And there are thousands of people now that will say, I don't know about that, but all I can tell you is I was blind, but now I can see. And there are still people out there waiting. So with this odd group of people, and I say we're odd because we're sitting in a room because we believe in doing something that 15 years ago didn't exist, and that many people out there would still say is questionable. And yet we're motivated by, we're inspired by, we're empowered by lives that are changed because of God working what only He can do. Okay, so here comes the chart. Go ahead and bring it up if you would, that next slide. Okay, it's just, you guys have seen it. Those are the half of you that's been here before, you've seen it. If you come to my funeral, you'll see it. It's going to be on the inside of the casket, looking at. So the vertical axis, the y-axis there is this world population. The horizontal axis is time. So the next slide comes up, and there's this little yellow bar, and that's 1950 through 2050. And I don't know how much of that space I'm going to get to occupy, but I'm over halfway, you know. And I don't know, I may be useless for the second half, but I'm over halfway. Each of us here have a yellow bar, and it's going to be a different width, and it's going to be a different place. Most of you in the room, your yellow bar is going to be slightly to the right of where mine's at. And it's just reflective of the time that we occupy. And I want us to understand that, first of all, take it back up there if you would, it shows. It's measurable. So we're looking at 2,000 years of time, and yet the space that we might have opportunity to occupy is measurable. It shows it's there. Lest we think that the time that we are here as contributors to the kingdom is insignificant. It's not. It's measurable. Now, I wonder what's unique or different or special about that time that we're in. Bring up the next slide. And there's the world population. And those are the people that God loves so much that he sent his son. And he feels the same way I felt that day whenever I realized that my children were in an accident versus whenever I thought it was just somebody else. You see, the rest of us look at that red line and it's just somebody else. Until we know somebody and love somebody that's on that red line that doesn't know Jesus. And when we can embrace that, when we connect with that, whenever that becomes it, then we become motivated. We become empowered because then we understand why. And the most empowering thing for me is to understand why. If I know why I'm doing something, if I can understand a little bit better why God may be doing something, then it takes me through the rough times. It takes me through the times that are challenging. If we go back up there with it one more time, just look at over the centuries and look how flat the population was. And that's not a minor thing. That's 500 million people along that time. But if I was to look at that and in my imaginary conversation that I have with God before time, and he and I are sitting down and visiting, and he says, you know what, you're going to become a possessor of the Spirit. You're going to become a part of the kingdom. You're going to get to occupy. When would you like to be there? When would you like to be on the earth? And I see that red line, and I say, there's something really special happening there. That could either be a great time to be around, or it could be a terrible time to be around. If I don't have the ability to reach those people, if people are just being swept down a river and I can't throw them a rope, then it's going to be terrible because I'm just seeing more people just swept away. And God says, in this imaginary conversation, God says, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you want to be there at that time, you'll be able to travel in hours where all the rest of the people that were before you, it took days, weeks, or months. I'll fix it. How about this? You can, with the push of a button, you can send the entire gospel message anywhere around the globe. And before, there were generations dedicated to transferring it by hand. I'll fix it where you could actually be there without being there. You can project an image anywhere on the globe that anybody can get to, and you can share the gospel with them. And I go, okay, I got it. That's where I want to be. That's us. That's us. And I'm not enough of a theologian to answer the question correctly, but I got to tell you, if all the folks that were present and doing their best to share the gospel before us are looking at us, if there is a cloud of witnesses that we are surrounded by, I don't want to face them without doing everything I can do. And that's us. If you want to leave empowered, if you want to be empowered, understand this. We are alive at the best time ever. I'm not talking about the best time in the last 100 years. I'm talking about the best time ever. We are part of the ability to experience something that others only dreamed of. And we see it and we experience it every time they come to know the same Jesus that we have come to know. And we see their lives transformed as he's continued to transform for thousands of years. I hope you'll take every opportunity that you get this weekend or this week, those of you that are online, to become empowered, to believe, to experience, to recognize what God stands ready to do through the people in this room. It's already gone far beyond what we could ever ask, think, or imagine. And I don't know where God's going to go with it. But I can tell you he's as passionate about those that are lost as I was about my children in the car that day. And he will run towards them. And we cannot become confused about the unchangeable message and the changing opportunities to share it. The message is the same. The reason it was shared the way it was when we read of it happening 2,000 years ago is because they used everything that they had available. Today, we will use everything that we have available to share the gospel. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of it.